Toodaloo.
Hello, hello. Good afternoon and welcome to episode 12 of Tales from the Hard Side by Dipalo Ventures. Today we are live at Tech Nexus recording studio. So thank you, Tech Nexus. I'm Monica Razan, your host for today's episode and an analyst at Dipalo Ventures. I work across different streams such as fund admin, portfolio support, investor relationships, marketing, etc. Let's welcome our guests for today's episodes, and I hope I don't mess up the last names, but Salvador Dueñas, Director of Program at Chicago Blend, and Tina Hrabak, Head of Platform at LongJump. Did I mess up?
Dueñas.
Dueñas.
Okay.
Hrabak.
Okay. Before we start or jump into our conversation, please note these recordings are pre-recorded, but we encourage you, our audience, to share your thoughts and questions in comment sections, and we will try our best to address them as soon as possible. Sal, why don't we start with you? Can you give our audience a brief introduction about yourself and Chicago Blend, and how do you directly or indirectly contribute to Chicago tech and ecosystem?
Yeah, totally. Well, first, thank you, Monica and Dipalo, for having me. And huge shout out to our host, Tech Nexus, for their awesome podcast studio and their support in setting all of this up. So quick background on me. I got my career started in running startup accelerators at a local nonprofit called Future Founders, helped underrepresented founders find product market fit at the idea stage, got to support anyone from candle manufacturers to autonomous drone delivery software and everything in between. Got to work with like amazing young founders throughout that program. And then around last year, an opportunity kind of presented itself at Chicago Blend to come and support their VC fellowship to help underrepresented aspiring VCs break into the ecosystem. The mission of Chicago Blend is to expand diversity, equity, and inclusion across the venture capital ecosystem here in Chicago. And they were founded by a team of local VCs who were concerned with a lack of representation in the VC ecosystem. And so it's started as a nights and weekends project where they essentially tracked the data of the staff makeup of all the VCs in Chicago, as well as their portfolio companies and their startups, their C-suite and leadership teams. And then when they kind of approached me to help run the VC fellowship is because they had an opportunity to launch a fellowship to help underrepresented aspiring VCs break into the ecosystem and, have a hand on the wheel there. When it comes to like the talent and actually working with folks from underrepresented backgrounds, helping them gain the knowledge, community, and experience needed to make for an awesome venture candidate. So to date, 78% of our fellows who have actively applied to venture roles have broken into venture, which we're really excited about. So that's a little bit about me, my background, and Chicago Blend.
Awesome. How about you, Tina?
Yeah, so I work for LongJump Ventures, which is a venture fund out of Chicago. I had spent about 10 years working in higher ed, mostly within business schools. And I took a really, I would say, profoundly impactful trip to Israel and Palestine, studying the startup market there while I was at the Kellogg School of Management on their team, and knew I wanted to come and work in startups. And one thing led to another. A former student of mine connected me to Future Founders. That's actually how Sal and I know each other. We were on the team together, and I was able to build out the startup programming there, first starting with their idea stage program, but then overseeing all of their adult programming. And yeah, that's been like a really amazing experience. And earlier this year, I was able to make the jump over to the venture side of things. I think capital was always like the core kind of barrier for the underrepresented founders that we mostly served at Future Founders. And LongJump had been on my radar for a long time, and we'll probably talk about that and why later. But yeah, I knew that a platform role would probably be what I would jump into if I came into venture. And I'm just really glad that LongJump ended up being the home for it, because we are the most active early stage check writers in Chicago with that focus on overlooked founders and ideas. So yeah, really, really happy to be here.
Awesome. Let's take one by one. Let's talk about Chicago Blend. It's all about breaking into VC, right? And you said, like you mentioned, we have a fellowship program for aspiring VCs, which is kind of preparing itself for next cohort. And I was fortunate enough to be part of the cohort last year, and also helping with the new cohort and like selection process. What's one thing that you will, or your recommendation for people or folks developing their or trying to enter VC industry, especially in this competitive market in Chicago?
Yeah, good question. I mean, I have many thoughts on it. I've built a whole program around that, and there's a couple different angles that you can kind of approach it. I would say that, you do not need an MBA to break into venture, although it certainly helps, but it comes at a large, financial cost and time commitment as well. But if you aren't going to go through that route, which people often say is like the traditional route, typically what I recommend people to do is to find and equip themselves with some type of domain expertise. So what are you an expert in? What type of unique visibility or experience do you have that gives you a unique perspective on deals, on startups, on the innovation ecosystem, on teams, on founders, on people? That deep domain expertise can come from school, like a master's or PhD in something. That expertise can come from your work experience. Maybe you worked for, a pre-seed to Series A startup and got to see the life cycle of that. Maybe you're a generalist, but really understand sales and how to build out sales teams. So what is that perspective that you can offer that is unique to you and your work experience? From there, having some type of financial analysis, background, or experience can help. And thankfully, through programs like Chicago Blend, but also our partners like VC University, you can kind of round out that experience, get that certificate, get that stamp of approval. You could also do independent research and analysis. But I would say, like, second to some type of domain expertise, having, especially for an entry-level role, having that financial analysis background can also be really helpful. But it's a little easier to get through other programs and offerings than some type of domain expertise through your work history, for example. That's a little bit harder. So what is that for you? What's your story? How do you brand yourself? And what type of startups do you want to support?
Okay. And as we talk about VCs, can you share some stats about emerging funds in Chicago? What really stand out to you?
Yes. So Chicago Blend's mission is to expand diversity, equity, inclusion across the VC ecosystem here in Chicago. So we put out annual reports that analyze the staff makeup of venture funds. And every kind of report that we kind of put out every year, the theme is usually, progress has been made, but, representation is still, we still have a lot of areas to grow. However, recently, in our 2022 report, we found that emerging managers or first-time funds, their staff makeup, for the first time, there's actually a slight majority of employees at these first-time funds that are women. Almost 51% of first-time funds in Chicago have at least 51% women working for their firm. Additionally, first-time funds have also had a greater representation of Black and African Americans at around 30%, as well as Asian Americans around 13-14%. And so we see first-time funds as playing a key role in expanding diversity, equity, inclusion, not only in Chicago but also nationally as well. So I think that's I think that's kind of an interesting insight that we were able to find through the data work that we've done.
So I know you work with founders or aspiring individuals, but do you know if there are resources that are supporting existing emerging VC funds in Chicago? And maybe this question is for both.
Yeah, go ahead, Tina.
I mean, maybe not Chicago specific, but one thing I would recommend, period, is Hustle Fund. They are a VC, I believe, out of the Bay Area. They are on fund 3 or 4 right now. I literally just earlier this week, they did it must have been a 4-hour webinar for emerging fund managers on. Okay. They did their pitch that they did when they were raising their first fund. They went through a run through of it, got critique on it, gave like their hot tips around it. They had a branding expert come in and talk about how she branded when she raised her first fund. They talked about raising from family offices, and they also talked about crowdfunding funds as an emerging manager. They also have a newsletter that is great for founders. They have one that's founder facing, and then a newsletter that is for funders, mostly geared at that emerging fund manager segment. So shout out to Hustle Fund. They are also Eric Bond on Twitter and Elizabeth Yin on Twitter, 2 of their partners. They both put out really great content that I think is relevant to fund managers.
I'd also like to throw in basically like the Y Combinator of emerging funds, like VC Labs is also really popular. It's a lot of people's go-to. So if you're an emerging fund manager, kind of check those out.
Awesome. Well, Tina, I need that links. I better reach out to you because I think at least for me, I haven't heard about Hustle Fund. So it would be nice for sharing with our audience and also just in general to know.
Yeah, I have a recording too. They sent out a recording of the webinar afterwards, and it was great. My boss also was on it, our managing partner. So even though we've already raised a fund, I think it's relevant for people that are still early on, maybe in Fund 1, thinking about Fund 2. And the full recording of the webinar is online now. So I'll share that so you can put that in the description.
Let's talk about attributes of collaborating environment in emerging funds, founders, or anyone who's getting into tech industry in Chicago. Do we have any stats there?
Around collaboration?
Mm-hmm.
No hard stats.
Anecdotes. I would say. I think it's a really collaborative kind of atmosphere. It's one of the benefits of Chicago is that we're like a medium-sized community, so almost everyone knows everyone. It's easy to get intros.
I have to mention Get Cities here. So Get Cities was really important. Has a really important role in the city of Chicago. So. Do you want to introduce it actually, and then we'll kind of lead into the pilots?
Yeah, I mean, Get Cities really changed the trajectory, I think, of both Sal and my career.
Yeah.
So Get Cities, I think 3 or 4 years ago, Melinda Gates awarded Chicago $50 million to work towards the advancement of women, non-binary, BIPOC in tech. And they established, using some of that funding, a working group, the Tech Equity Working Group. So Sal and I, in our previous roles at Future Founders, were on that group. The first year, they established some projects. One of those pilots, which both of he and I were on, was the Tech Rise program. So talk about collaboration there. I mean, P33 and Desiree and the team over there, which shout out, they just got a $3 million grant from the federal government to continue to work on Tech Rise and expand it. But that was a pilot partially that came out of Get's work, but also Sal's, position at Blend had its roots in it. So.
Yeah, I mean, one of the reasons why we bring it up, not just because of the cool outcomes in pilots, but also it's all done throughout collaboration. So any startup accelerator, tech-facing nonprofit, a lot of VC firms, universities are represented in this working group, and we all collectively pilot solutions to advance Get's mission, which is expanding women, non-binary, and BIPOC individuals' access towards tech. So that can be from the startup funding side, from the talent side, from the venture side, which is where something like Tech Rise eventually gets piloted from or supported from through Get. The Chicago Blend Venture Fellowship actually originally was a pilot throughout this Get Cities working group. A collection of VCs and supporters worked on this pilot program to help underrepresented individuals break into venture capital. And what's really cool about it is after the pilot program kind of finds validation, it later then finds a home at a local nonprofit or organization to kind of continue scaling up that work. And so it was around that time that the pilot program for this fellowship was successful. They wanted to continue scaling it. And then it found a home in Chicago Blend, where they eventually brought me on board part-time to manage the program, launch the program, recruit for it, and run the day-to-day. So I wouldn't be here without collaboration, which was what our question was, and the amazing work that Get does and the community did, and then brought us to where we are now. And now after the pilot program, Chicago Blend's been able to run 3 cohorts of the fellowship, and as mentioned, have been able to break in 78% of fellows who want to break in.
Yeah, and actually returning to your original question around collaboration, like one of the pilots that we're working on right now in the 2023 year that Sal's actually on the working group for is around emerging fund managers, how we can better support them, those initiatives, how we can create shared services so they're not spending a lot of money on the kind of boilerplate things you need to be a fund manager. So yeah, there's just like really good pockets of like things happening within the tech community, and it's conveners like Get and P33 and World Business Chicago that really enable a lot of that.
Let's talk more about collaboration later in the session. But
Cool.
Tina, on your side, like you mentioned, you recently had the transition from Future Founder to LongJump. So how's that entire process been for you? And then what it actually means to be a head of platform? Like, what do you think? And is this a route that emerging VCs can take on their journey?
Yeah, my career journey has been pretty non-linear. If you had asked me like 7 years ago if this is what I would have been doing, I would have been like, what is a head of platform? I am just thrilled to be in VC and doing this type of role. Head of platform or platform roles look very different depending on the fund. So when I first got into this job, I think my partners had an idea of what this was going to look like or what some of their priorities were going to be, but and what I really love about working at LongJump is they've kind of let me make this what I wanted to. So one thing that was really vital to me when I first got into this role was talking to other platform people, because my partners had so many ideas and we're small. We don't have the funds or time to do all of them. So I went on kind of a listening tour of our founders in our portfolio, our LPs, but most importantly, other platform people. Sal made a really important connection for me early on. Jim Conti from Hyde Park Venture Partners, who was on their platform team there. And he just was like, yeah, you're going to get lots of ideas, pick a couple lanes and just really run with those. He brought me into a platform group that is, mostly people that operate in the same area as I do within Chicago. So talk about collaboration. They're amazing. And yeah, I've really concentrated on a couple things. Like, what does it mean to be head of platform at LongJump? One is events. One of the things that we have the benefit of being a Chicago or geographic focused firm is that most of our founders are here. So doing events that are fun, that enrich our founders, both, in person or virtually. We do a co-working day once a month in collaboration with Drive Capital. They have a beautiful space. We bring people into it and our founders love it. And then I do a lot. I think something that's a little bit different. I don't know. I'm still relatively new, but compared to what I hear about other platform people, I'm doing a lot of operational stuff internally. So not just supporting our companies and our founders, because we support our founders, I think, in a little different way than a lot of funds do. But yeah, I just, systemizing things because I'm only the second full-time hire at LongJump, making things work clean and efficient on the back end and freeing up time for my managing partner so that he can go out and do all the managing partner stuff.
Interesting, because like I'm in a transition of turning into like a full-time platform person. So it's really interesting to know someone else saying all these things. because I'm like, oh, what do I do? I'm so new. Should I be doing this or not? But
Yeah,
it
I
just
mean, I'm pretty self-directed. I mean, Sal can probably, he worked on my team, so he can probably, I have a very strong sense of confidence. I listen and then I just like run with things. And then I do want to also hear and then like listen to feedback on the other side of things. So yeah, you'll figure out, I'm going to go on a listening tour of your founders. That's the most important thing. Great
Yeah.
stuff that they want. And as far as like to your second question, is this something that like people can move into, or like does it make sense for people that want to get in VC to move into a platform role? It really just depends on your interests. Like for me, I've worked in like higher ed for 10 years. Like I said, I worked at Future Founders for almost 5 years. I had just been running programs so long for students or founders that platform really overlapped with that role a lot in a meaningful way. So it made sense for me rather than going into an investing role. And VC does mean platform does mean different things at different VCs. Like Jim, who I mentioned before, he was a recruiter before this.
Yeah.
So he just is like big on the talent recruitment side for companies as a kind of segment of platform. There's, platform people that are marketers and they just do newsletters all the time. It just really depends on the fund, your interests, and if it makes sense with where you want to go with your career.
Interesting. So tell us more about LongJump. What is that one thing that makes LongJump unique, and how do you contribute your portfolio startup growth and success? I know you kind of mentioned this.
Yeah,
already,
I've teased it, that we support our founders a little bit differently, and the reason why I wanted to come over to LongJump. So LongJump is a founder-led firm. All of our partners are actively running companies.
Yeah.
It's a little bit of like a Techstars mafia that we have working for us. Most of our partners met in Techstars. One of our partners was managing director of Techstars in like the mid 2010s. So a lot of them like come out of that kind of group of people pre-COVID, and they are all founders who they're just a couple steps ahead of where our founders are right now. They've raised seed, Series A. A lot of them are like firsts. Like the first Native American woman to raise over $1 million. She's actually raised $20 million. One of the first Hispanic women to raise over $1 million. We have like rock stars like Gary Cooper on the team, who's kind of like a minor celebrity in Chicago and beyond. And so it is that we have these like exceptional founders who are also reflective of the founders that we invest in. And every time a founder gets into our portfolio, they're assigned a deal lead that basically becomes like their point of contact within the fund. They get on a text basis with their deal lead, and they just really help them navigate like the ups and downs, because again, they're just a couple steps ahead of them. So our kind of founder support model is very it's as intensive as the founder wants it to be. There's some founders who just like take the check, and that is the most important thing, and we are under no illusion about that. Like, it's about the money. But there's some that like, we're really helping them during whatever challenges or opportunities that they are facing, and that is the big LongJump factor for us.
Awesome. Let's get back on collaboration. I think that's one of the main part, and Chicago is all about the ecosystem collaboration, right? And we all participated in like citywide events like Tech Chicago Week, Illinois Growth Innovation Fund Summit, ILGIF. It's a current recurring theme that we noticed was improving Chicago's venture, startups, and collaboration ecosystem, right? Chicago has often been compared to Bay Area, New York, and Boston in terms of like available capital, competitive startups, and ecosystem collaborations. So this is for both of you, right? Whoever can take place. What are your takes on where Chicago is positioned right now in terms of venture ecosystem?
I think for me, I love how many firms, especially early stage firms like LongJump, have a thesis around supporting underrepresented founders. I think of LongJump. I think of Lofty. I think of Vitalize Angels, and a handful of others like early stage firms. And then you even have something like TechRise, which is non-dilutive capital coming towards underrepresented founders, and that's that first check that they get. And I just haven't observed that as much in other cities and ecosystems. And I think that's something very unique to us, is like this commitment that we have to building representation like in tech.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. That's where Chicago is kind of shining, especially in this moment. And it's just top of mind because I saw Desiree Vargas Wrigley talk about this morning, is that, TechRise is a very important component of this ecosystem for underrepresented founders, because the friends and family round might not exist in their network, and TechRise has helped kind of be that over the past 2 years or 3 years. If I recall correctly, like they've deployed $2 million in capital over the past 2 or 3 years, and the founders that have gone through their programs or been awarded in those competitions have gone on to raise over $70 million in capital.
Yeah.
And right now, I think in 2022, 15% of the capital that was allocated in Chicago went to women or BIPOC founders, which makes us kind of the best place for early stage underrepresented founders in the country and in the world. So I think like there's really good movement and much more to be done. And the question that's on a lot of our minds right now is, how do we get those people to seed and Series A and really see wealth creation happening and talent development happening as ripple effects of that? And that's something that I think you see more on the coast. But we definitely have work to be done. I think it's still really, really hard, for founders to raise without a ton of traction. And a lot of times our founders are having to look to the coast to get their, subsequent rounds done. So I think that's where we could improve. But yeah.
I would also say, I think it is something that does make us special is our commitment to diversity here in the startup ecosystem. Not just amongst the founder demographics, but even across industries as well. World Business Chicago just put out an awesome report. Shout out to Robin from their research team there, where in the city of Chicago, there is not one sector that is economically more represented than 13% of the local economy here in Chicago, which I think is insane. I think the largest representation for an industry is our healthcare industry. Yeah. So, we're not over-indexed on tech. We're not over-indexed on healthcare specifically. It's really diverse in terms of the type of businesses that are here, the types of corporations that are here, the talent, the backgrounds. And I think that makes us, that's a big strength of the city.
Yeah, we're economically resilient because if one industry has a hard year, there's other industries that hopefully are weathering it. And that talent thing should not be overlooked either. Having worked at Kellogg and worked across a lot of the universities or partnered with a lot of the universities here, there's brilliant people here working on everything under the sun. I mean, quantum computing and just everything. And so companies, I would hope, would want to come here. I was actually talking to somebody that's a recruiter for Grindr, the Grindr. And she, which was what I said when she said that. And she's like, they were based out in LA and they happened to hire a couple contractors in Chicago, and they were so hardworking. And the cost of paying a Chicago contractor versus a Chicago tech employee versus the coast is not an inconsiderate savings for the company. We can pay good wages in Chicago, and they ended up building out. She's in charge of building out a team here, which I think is so cool because even some of these scaled startups are seeing that there's a lot to offer within the Chicago talent pool.
Yeah. We talk about a lot of industry, right? There is quantum computing, what you said, med tech, ag tech. But since Dipalo is all about hard tech, I wanted to get a little bit point of view on hardware and hard tech. What do you guys see in that environment?
Well, MHub just opened up a huge new building to support hard tech businesses. And I feel like every quarter I hear about a new hard tech accelerator that they're launching. MedTech One, Hard Tech One.
We're so lucky to have them here.
Yeah, I think it all goes through them. I know there's other hard tech communities, and definitely through the universities like Polsky, Northwestern, UIC has MATLAB too. But I really think it all eventually comes through MHub. So just shout out to them and their team and their work that they've done. They throw amazing parties. They have amazing demo days. I think in terms of hard tech in the city of Chicago, like M-Hub is just such a big name.
And people just need, I mean, I'm so glad you guys exist because, and we also invest in hard tech, but like a lot of funds are afraid to invest in hard tech because it's, capital intensive, but we've had some pretty cool, we actually just, I'm going to shout out a portfolio company yesterday, Blip Energy, came out of Northwestern, basically are working to like harness excess energy. I'm probably butchering exactly what their product does, through like battery capacity. And I think that their initial product is like air conditioners, specifically looking at the renter market. And they just won a $680 million grant from the Department of Energy. So that's the other thing with hard tech is like there's a lot of like non-dilutive and grant funding there to supplement the VC track as well.
Yeah, and I
That's
think
huge.
Blip Energy is something that we were looking into because they kind of check mark the climate tech side of things. And as Dipalo is growing, we are looking more into climate tech. So,
girl, we're looking at a lot of companies right now, and we're in the middle of this is also something I think Chicago is going for it.
yeah.
We're in the middle of an application interview review phase, and I would say like probably a quarter of the companies that we've looked at this kind of wave of applications or wave of interviews are in climate tech, and a lot of them have to do with hardware.
Yeah.
It's popping up in Chicago a lot. I love that.
And I will say from an aspiring funder standpoint, that rings true as well. We're in the middle of interviews right now for our fellowship. And one of the questions we ask is like, are you coming in with a thesis? What type of founders do you want to support? And it's a lot of ESG, a lot of climate tech folks coming to this program wanting to fund and support climate tech and ESG founders.
Interesting, because I think couple days back, World Business Chicago just announced that they're gonna do a climate tech summit. So I'm kind of looking forward to it, like see how Chicago is turning into more of like climate tech and sustainability. Because at the end of the day, I love software. We all access software every day, but to be real, software can't alone only solve problems in this physical world. So I think this is also a quote from my managing director of week, like software alone can't solve the problems, world's problems. So I think it's true. And seeing Chicago grow, it's for me, it's been like 2 years now in VC market, and seeing that transition from just all about software to going and like thinking about more hardware, climate. It's just good. It feels good. It feels like you're doing something, and you're not one of those people like if you're in medtech that gives you that motivations and proudness. But now you feel like, okay, we have other platforms to go in and like help ecosystem and like help environment.
Yeah, so you can't solve climate change with an app.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Reaply.
True. Okay. Getting on our last question, and I know we already kind of put things on that, but with your experience and insights, what are the keys to shaping dynamics of local tech community? What are the lessons that we all have learned all these years with your experience of 10 years and like working from different platforms or organizations?
I'm like shaping a tech community, like if we started from scratch or something, or like what works.
Shaping, like what do you think, like while working in this tech ecosystem, what motivates you?
I think for me, also kind of what makes Chicago special, but for any tech community, I think lessons learned from my experience is like there is a give first culture here.
I knew you were gonna say that. Yeah. I knew it.
And I really love it. I really love it. It's really special. It's very genuine and authentic, and I think it just all makes the world a better place. It makes working a lot more fun. There's a give first culture here. I think my career has greatly benefited from people just like offering up time or being willing to just chat about their role for 30 minutes. So many people are willing to make intros. People have been very generous with introductions here in the city of Chicago, and I just haven't observed that on the coast. And I hear stories about New York tech and how competitive it is. And like the culture there, and it just doesn't feel like give first. So I think that's something that's really cool about this community is like if you need an intro to a VC, if you need an intro to a partner, or let me send you resources or names or something. I think there's this desire to help each other. It's like this collective mission that the city has, is to see the city succeed. And I think if you're a founder trying to raise money or trying to grow your business, or if you're an early entry-level employee just trying to grow in your career, like, people are just down to help. And I think that that's made my career grow, but also just the city and what we've done here.
Yeah, I think that Chicago really knows where it wants to go. And a lot of people are working really hard to make that happen. And people really believe in that. Like, there's some very clear leaders within the ecosystem. I mentioned Desiree Aubin at World Business Chicago. So people like Gary. I think the politicians also, I think, this is a hard place to be a politician, but from Ram to Lori to now Brandon Johnson, they all understand the space that tech has within the ecosystem and have been generally supportive of the efforts that all of the quasi-governmental organizations are doing, and are really they show up. And I once saw Ram say that his role as the mayor is being the chief marketing officer for Chicago, although I think there is a chief marketing officer now. But he said his role is to be out there amplifying Chicago when he's not in the city. And I think all of the mayors really are great about that and really touting the Chicago ecosystem. So yeah, it's just from those leaders, those figureheads, those politicians, to the people that are on the ground doing the work, to the funds. There is an all in it together movement right now, and we're huge cheerleaders of the founders who are actually doing it. It's the founders who are getting us to where we need to be.
You mentioned Abin from WBC, who's incredible. Something profound that he said one time was, he says, people like to say that Instagram would never be able to be started here in the city of Chicago, and something he said that always connected with me is I don't know if we want Instagram to be started here in Chicago. We want to see other businesses being started. We don't need another social app. We don't need another high growth tech platform that tears the social fabric of our culture apart. We want to see genuine businesses, substantive businesses creating real value for overlooked groups and industries. And I think that's something that Chicago can do.
And I think to Abin's story, everyone that is working in, or everyone that I've come across in the ecosystem, they're not just in this because it's rocket ship, want to get rich. Obviously money is a huge component of this, and people do want to generate wealth through this. But Abin's story about why he cares so much about this relates to him. I think it's the orange envelope story. I don't know if you guys have ever heard this. When he was working in correction, overseeing corrections or doing something that related to corrections in Chicago. And he was realizing the racial divide between who goes into correctional facilities and the economic opportunity that some populations lack versus others. And that's the fire of his, economic development, passion. And I think for my partners, there's it's not just money. It's people that want this to be an amazing city where everyone can lift themselves up, and that there's opportunity within tech or within innovation for anyone that wants to have it, and to reach back and bring people with them on the journey. So it's just good people working here. It's that Midwestern good.
I love this, and I think I remember, Sal, I was telling you this in Chicago Tech Week. We had a session, and someone on stage, key speaker, said that when was the last time we saw Chicago doing something high as Bay Area? And I think our entire conversation today just gave him or her the answer about here's Chicago doing so much, and we don't really have to be another social media app, but we have what it takes to be that. It has its own unique style, and Chicago itself stands for it. We don't have to copy anyone. And a lot of Bay Area ecosystem, like you said, people are coming here because of the people are so hardworking. So last question, and I know we are on our time, but how can we help, whether it's Dipalo Ventures, whether it's we as individual help for Blend or for LongJump or just in general to Chicago area?
Give first.
Put founders first too. Yeah. I mean, that's the biggest thing. especially for thinking about a VC. I mean, and assuming that most of the audience for this is VC,
Yeah.
like venture funds don't exist without founders.
Yeah.
And founders, especially when they're raising money, have to just like be knocked down so much that we should be treating them like the significantly amazing humans that they are. And too often we hear the opposite, where they get ghosted or just never get
stop
an
saying
answer.
it's too early to invest. I think give more substantive feedback than that. Like, what would it take for them to be at the right moment? Like, why are they too early? I think Charlene, who's at Laura Hippo now, who's an alumni of our pilot program, she's always gives feedback to her founders that she says no to. And it takes a little bit more effort, but I think is, really positively impacts the community.
Interesting, because we are like in this phrase of like giving more feedbacks to our founders, whether we go in and like make a deal and process the entire process of like getting them investment, or it's just like initial conversation. I think that's one thing that we are really in process of like making it more strong, or habit of doing it every now and then. But so as we draw this episode to a close, thank you to our wonderful guests, Sal and Tina.
Thank you
so
for
much.
having us.
And not to forget TechNexus for
Yes.
letting and host this event in their recording session. It's such an amazing place, and I had such an amazing time like having conversations with you guys. It's also my first time full-time hosting, so
You killed
it. A+.
thank you so much. And to our audience, your engagement is what drives us. So if you have any questions, suggestions for upcoming episodes, do not hesitate to share with us in our comment section. Stay tuned for more engaging conversation. Until then, stay curious, keep exploring the hard tech with us. Thank you.
Love it.